In the midst of a storm, a millionaire arrives home early and sees his housekeeper kneeling in the garden, hugging two little girls shivering from the cold. The scene takes his breath away. Why were they out there, soaked, when there was shelter inside the mansion? As he presses for answers, he uncovers a cruel truth hidden within his own home. And what comes next completely transforms his views on wealth, love, and humanity. The storm battered the neighborhood of Kensington in London, turning the wide tree-lined streets into small makeshift streams. The sky, once blue, now displayed a greyish hue. That made the afternoon feel almost like night. Arthur Sterling squinted as he drove his Mercedes through the mansion's entrance. It wasn't usual for him to return home so early, but the meeting with foreign investors had been cancelled at the last minute due to the heavy rain paralyzing parts of the city. At 45, Arthur had built an empire in the technology sector. The son of humble parents from rural Yorkshire, he had left home at 17 with just an old backpack and the dream of conquering London. 2.5 decades later, his software company was valued in the billions, and his name was among the most successful entrepreneurs in the country. Everything he touched seemed to turn to gold. As the electronic gate opened slowly, something caught his attention. On the side of the expansive garden, under a centuries-old oak tree that had been part of the grounds long before the mansion was built, there were 3 figures. At first, he thought they were gardeners trying to protect a plant from the storm, but as he got closer, his heart raced. It was Mrs. Eleanor Vance, his housekeeper, sitting on the drenched grass with 2 small girls huddled in her arms. The 3 were completely soaked, trembling visibly even from a distance. The children seemed to cling to the woman as if their lives depended on it, and Eleanor was embracing them, trying to shield them from the rain with her own body. He saw her break off a piece of wet bread and hand it to the smaller of the girls. Arthur slammed on the brakes, leaving the car running at the garage entrance. He stepped out into the rain without bothering to grab an umbrella. "Mrs. Vance," he shouted, running towards them. "For God's sake, what are you doing out here in this storm?" The woman stood up with a start, nearly stumbling on the wet grass. Her thin face expressed pure terror, as if she had been caught committing an unforgivable crime. The girls, one who looked about 7 and the other around 5, remained with their heads down, clinging to their mother's legs. "Mr. Sterling," her voice came out trembling. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We're just leaving. Leaving? Are you mad? You're all soaked," he interrupted, feeling the heavy rain seep into his Italian suit. "Come inside immediately." Eleanor hesitated, holding her daughters tightly against her. "I can't, Mr. Sterling. Mrs. Victoria, she—" The woman swallowed hard, her whole body shaking. "Mrs. Victoria what?" he questioned, irritation growing in his voice. "She doesn't allow it," Eleanor whispered, so quietly he could barely hear her over the sound of the rain. Arthur felt a strange tightness in his chest, a mix of confusion and indignation. He looked at the children again. The younger one had purple lips from the cold, and both were wearing simple clothes stuck to their bodies by the water. You didn't need to be a doctor to know they could get seriously ill if they remained in those conditions. "This is ridiculous. Come inside right now," he ordered, no longer accepting protests. He practically pushed them across the lawn towards the side door that led to the service area. Inside the house, the contrast was stark. The warm environment, the impeccable marble floors, the decorative objects that cost the equivalent of years of Eleanor's salary. Arthur led them directly to the kitchen, a large modern space he rarely frequented. "Martha," he called to the cook, who appeared immediately from the pantry, "bring towels quickly, and have someone find some dry clothes." The cook's eyes widened at the scene, but she nodded quickly and disappeared. Meanwhile, Eleanor stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen, as if afraid to wet the floor. The girls, glued to her, looked around with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Now, Mrs. Vance, I want you to explain to me why you and your daughters were under a tree in the rain when we have more than 15 rooms in this house." The woman opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Just then, Martha returned with piles of soft towels, and a younger staff member brought some clothes. "They're my nieces. They should fit the girls," the young woman explained, placing the items on the table. Arthur thanked her with a nod and turned back to Eleanor, who was starting to dry her daughters with trembling hands. He noticed that despite being equally soaked, She was concerned with the children first. "I'm waiting for an explanation," he insisted, crossing his arms. An uncomfortable silence hung over the kitchen. The staff exchanged glances, but no one dared to speak. It was then that Joan, the head housekeeper who had worked at the mansion for over a decade, entered the kitchen and stopped upon seeing the scene. "Mr. Sterling, you're back early today." "Yes, Joan, and I found Mrs. Vance and her daughters under the oak tree in the rain. I'm trying to understand why." Joan sighed deeply, looking at Eleanor with compassion. She approached her employer and lowered her voice. "Mr. Sterling, the girls aren't allowed inside the house. Mrs. Victoria's orders." "What do you mean they aren't allowed inside the house?" His voice rose an octave. "The nursery they used to go to closed 3 weeks ago," Joan explained. "Mrs. Vance has no one to leave them with. On the first day, she brought the girls and asked Mrs. Victoria for permission for them to stay quietly in a corner of the service area. The mistress agreed, but—" Joan hesitated, looking at Eleanor, who was now dressing her youngest daughter in a dry t-shirt several sizes too big for her. "But," Arthur pressed. "The girls were playing, making a bit of noise like any children would," Joan continued. "Mrs. Victoria got annoyed. She said she didn't want her mansion turning into—" She swallowed hard before finishing. "A shelter for commoners. She said if Mrs. Vance had nowhere to leave her daughters, she should stay home and lose her job." Arthur felt as if he had been punched in the gut. He looked at Eleanor, who kept her head down as she dried her eldest daughter's curly hair. "Since then," Joan went on, her voice thick with emotion, "Mrs. Vance has been bringing the girls in secret, but she keeps them outside the house all day. She goes out every hour or so to give them food, water, to check if they're okay. In the shade when it's sunny, but today it was raining," Arthur completed, feeling a wave of nausea. The sound of heels on the marble floor announced the arrival of Victoria Sterling. Tall, elegant, with impeccably styled blonde hair and perfectly manicured nails, she entered the kitchen like a queen in her castle. Upon seeing her drenched husband and the housekeeper with her daughters, she stopped short. "What is going on here?" she demanded, her cold gaze sweeping over the scene. "That's what I'd like to know, Victoria," Arthur replied, feeling an anger he didn't recognize in himself. "Why were our housekeeper and her small daughters under a tree in the rain?" Victoria's porcelain face tightened slightly. She adjusted the pearl necklace on her neck and straightened her posture. "You know very well I don't allow children roaming around the house, Arthur. This is a high-end residence, not a community daycare." "They were in the rain, Victoria. 2 small children soaked, cold." "It's not my problem if Eleanor can't organize her life," she retorted with a shrug. "I have important social commitments. I receive influential people. I can't have children running around and making noise." Arthur looked at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. Married for 12 years, they had met when he was already beginning to succeed in business. Victoria, the daughter of a declining traditional family, had brought to the marriage the surname and social connections that he, as new money, needed to be accepted into London's high society. He had contributed the money to restore the status her family had lost. For years, Arthur had delegated the entire management of the house to Victoria, immersing himself completely in his business. Now he wondered what else happened under his roof, while he spent 16 hours a day at the office. "The girls are dry now. I'll take them home," Eleanor murmured, gathering her things. "You're not going anywhere in this rain, Mrs. Vance," Arthur declared, without taking his eyes off his wife. "Stay here with your daughters until the weather improves. Martha, please prepare a snack for them." "Arthur," Victoria protested, "you can't just—" "Victoria," he cut her off, with a low, controlled voice that silenced the entire kitchen. "In my study. Now." Without waiting for a reply, he left the kitchen, knowing his wife would follow. As he walked through the corridors of the mansion he had bought with such pride years ago, he felt as if he were walking through a stranger's house. What kind of home had he built, after all? In the study, he sat down heavily in his leather chair, watching the rain through the window. He thought of the 2 girls shivering under the oak tree and felt a lump in his throat. How many times had this happened? How many hours had those children spent alone in the garden, while he, just a few meters away, closed £1 million deals with no idea what was going on? Victoria entered the study and closed the door, with a soft click. Her posture was perfect, as always, the result of years of etiquette and classical ballet lessons. She sat gracefully in the chair opposite her husband, crossing her legs and adjusting her expensive skirt. "You didn't have to humiliate me in front of the staff, Arthur," she said in a controlled tone. "We have to maintain an image of authority." Arthur looked up to face her. The silence between them lasted for a few seconds, as heavy as the rain that continued to fall. "Humiliate you?" he finally repeated, incredulous. "And what about the humiliation of a woman and 2 small children sitting in the rain, shivering from the cold?" "Don't be dramatic," Victoria rolled her eyes. "No one was undergoing any absurd suffering. It's just water, and they have a covered spot at the back of the garden, near the shed. If they chose to stay in the rain, it was their decision." Arthur felt his blood boil. How could he have married someone with such a lack of empathy? More importantly, how had he not noticed it before? "A covered spot at the back of the garden? Are you talking about the gardener's tool shed? That place full of pesticides and dangerous tools?" Victoria shrugged. "Eleanor is a grown woman responsible for her daughters. If she decided to bring them to work, the least she can do is keep them away from the main house. We have a standard to maintain, Arthur. What would your friends think if they arrived for afternoon tea and found children running through the living room?" "They would think we are normal people with employees who have lives and families," Arthur exploded, slamming his hand on the desk. "And since when do you care so much about what others think?" "Since always," she retorted, raising her voice for the first time. "That's exactly why you married me, wasn't it? To get access to London's traditional families, to be accepted in the circles that matter. Don't play the saint now." The accusation hit Arthur like a slap. There was truth in what Victoria said. When they met, he was just new money, with wealth, but without the refinement or connections needed to be truly accepted by the London elite. Victoria, with her traditional surname, impeccable manners and social circle, had been the perfect gateway. "That doesn't justify treating people as if they were disposable," he replied, calmer now but no less firm. "Eleanor has worked here for 4 years. Do you even know her daughters, Victoria?" His wife raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Why should I know the housekeeper's daughters?" "Because they are human beings who frequent our home." Arthur took a deep breath, trying to control his frustration. "What are the girls' names?" Victoria shifted in her chair, visibly uncomfortable. "I don't remember. They're common names." "Grace and Lily." Arthur surprised himself by saying their names. He didn't know he knew them until that moment. Perhaps he had heard Eleanor mention them at some point. "Grace is 7 and is in year 2. Lily is 5 and just started reception, or at least she was until the nursery closed." Victoria rolled her eyes again. "So what? What does that have to do with us?" "Eleanor used to wake up at 4 in the morning to take the girls to nursery and then come to work here. Now, with nowhere to leave them, she's risking her job and her daughter's health because you can't stand the sound of children in a house with over 10,000 square feet. It's my right to set the rules of this house," Victoria defended herself, straightening her posture. "If Eleanor isn't satisfied with the working conditions, she can find another job. In the middle of an economic crisis, with 2 children to support." Arthur shook his head. "You really don't understand how the world works for ordinary people, do you?" "I understand that everyone has their place, and that a housekeeper's children should not be roaming around their employer's house," she replied coldly. "My mother always used to say familiarity with the staff is like leaving the door open for thieves." Arthur stared at his wife, trying to process what he had just heard. Suddenly, many things made sense. The way Victoria treated the staff, always with distance and superiority, the insistence on calling them by nicknames instead of their real names, the refusal to let them use the same bathrooms or eat the same food. Those ideas are from the last century, Victoria. People are people regardless of how much money they have, and I will not allow children to be exposed to inhumane conditions under my roof. "Oh, now it's your roof," she challenged. "I thought it was ours since we're married. Or is it only ours when it suits you?" "It's ours," he corrected himself, "and that's exactly why I'm setting new rules starting today. Mrs. Vance can bring her daughters to work whenever she needs to. We will set up a space for them in the service area." Victoria stood up, indignant. "I will not accept this. What about my social gatherings? What about when my friends come for tea? Your friends will have to get used to the fact that employees are also human beings with families, Arthur replied, adamant. In fact, it's time to review a few things in this house. How many hours a day does Eleanor work? Victoria frowned as if the question were absurd. The normal hours, from 7 to 7. 12 hours a day? Arthur's eyes widened. And how much does she earn? Enough, Victoria replied evasively. Arthur, let's not start discussing salaries now. You've never cared about the management of the house. Well, I care now, he declared, standing up as well. I want to see the payroll for all employees. And I'm reducing the workday to 8 hours with a day off each week. This is non-negotiable. Victoria's face became a mask of outrage. Her perfectly made-up lips formed a thin line. You're mad. No one in our position treats staff like this. We'll be a laughingstock. I'd rather be a laughingstock than a source of shame, Arthur replied, leaving the study. He returned to the kitchen where he found Eleanor and the girls sitting at the table, eating sandwiches prepared by Martha. He noticed how eagerly the children ate, as if they hadn't seen food in hours. Lily, the younger one, had a round face framed by dark curls that, now dry, formed a halo around her head. Her cheeks were already rosy, recovering from the cold. Grace, taller and thinner, watched everything with attentive, suspicious eyes, protective of her sister even while eating. Mrs. Vance, Arthur called, approaching the table. We need to talk. The woman immediately stood up, tense. Mr. Sterling, I'm sorry for the trouble. I swear it will never— No, please sit down, he interrupted, pulling up a chair for himself. It was strange to sit at the kitchen table, a space he rarely frequented in his own home. I want to apologize for what happened. I didn't know your daughters were forbidden from entering the house. Eleanor looked down, embarrassed. Mrs. Victoria is right, Mr. Sterling. It's not proper to bring children to work. No, Mrs. Vance, she is not right, he disagreed firmly. And from today on, your daughters are welcome here whenever they need to come. We will prepare a suitable space for them in the service area with toys and drawing materials. The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. But, Mrs. Victoria, I've already spoken with my wife. The decisions will now be made by both of us, not just her, he explained, knowing that conversation with Victoria was far from over. And there's more. Starting next week, your hours will be from 8 to 5 with Sundays off. Eleanor looked at him as if he had just announced he was taking her to the moon. 8 to 5, but that's too little time to do everything I need to in the house. Then we'll hire someone else to help, Arthur decided, surprising himself with his own decision. It's not fair for you to work 12 hours a day, especially with 2 young daughters to care for. The housekeeper looked like she was about to cry. Her hands, calloused from hard work, trembled slightly. On the table. Mr. Sterling, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Mrs. Vance, he assured her with a gentle smile. I just want to know more about you and your daughters. How long have you been a widow? The question caught her off guard. She swallowed hard before answering. 3 years. My Joseph worked in construction. He had an accident. She didn't finish the sentence, but Arthur understood. He looked at the girls, who were now paying attention to the conversation. Lily had crumbs around her mouth and Grace watched her mother with eyes. That seemed much older than her 7 years. And where do you live? In Tower Hamlets, Mr. Sterling. We have a small rented room in a tenement building, she replied simply. It's not much, but it's enough for the 3 of us. Arthur nodded, feeling a tightness in his chest. He knew of Tower Hamlets from reports on crime and poverty. Imagining Eleanor and the 2 girls returning there alone every day made him feel even worse for never having paid attention to their situation before. And how do you get here every day? By bus to the terminal, then. Another bus, and I walk for about 20 minutes, she explained. We leave home at 5 in the morning. And when you work at night, too? Joan mentioned you have another job. Eleanor nodded with a tired sigh. I clean an office in the city, from 8 to 11. I leave the girls with a neighbour. Arthur did the math mentally. If Eleanor worked from 7 to 7 at his house, then from 8 to 11 in the city, and still had to take public transport, she probably slept only 4 or 5 hours a night. And when do you rest? He asked, genuinely concerned. She gave a sad smile. You get used to it, Mr. Sterling. I have no choice. Grace, the older girl, looked directly at Arthur for the first time. Her dark eyes held a mixture of suspicion and hope. Are you going to fire my mum? She asked, with a firm voice that surprised everyone. Arthur's heart ached. No, Grace. On the contrary, I want your mother to continue working here, but in better conditions, and you will always be welcome. The girl nodded seriously, as if evaluating the sincerity of that promise. Thank you, she said simply, returning to her sandwich. Lily, the younger one, apparently encouraged by her sister's interaction, smiled shyly at Arthur. She had a missing front tooth, which made her smile even more captivating. I have a doll named Princess, she announced out of nowhere. She lives in my backpack. Arthur couldn't help but smile. Really? And what is this princess like? She's a mermaid, Lily replied enthusiastically. She has a green tail and yellow hair. How lovely, Arthur commented, charmed by the child's spontaneity. He wasn't used to talking to small children. He and Victoria had never had children, a decision she had made, claiming she didn't want to ruin her body with a pregnancy. At that moment, Victoria appeared at the kitchen door. Her face was composed again, with no trace of the earlier irritation. She smiled, but it wasn't a smile that reached her eyes. Arthur, darling, can we speak in private? She asked with a sweet voice he recognized as her manipulative tone. Of course, he replied, standing up. Mrs. Vance, please, make yourselves at home with your daughters. When the rain stops, Robert will drive you home. There's no need, Mr. Sterling, Eleanor protested. We can. Take the bus as usual. In this rain, no way, he insisted. It's the least I can do. He left the kitchen, following Victoria to the living room. She closed the door behind them and turned, dropping the fake smile. What do you think you're doing? She hissed, keeping her voice low so the staff wouldn't hear. Promising the world to the housekeeper, offering our driver as if he were a taxi. I'm doing what's right, Victoria. Something we should have done a long time ago. You don't understand what you're causing, she continued in a warning tone. When you get too close to the staff, they lose respect. They start thinking they have rights, that they're our equals. They are, Arthur exclaimed, exasperated. They're human beings just like us, Victoria. With the difference that we pay their salaries, she retorted coldly. When you start treating employees like friends, they take advantage. They ask for raises, they want time off, they bring their personal problems. It's a slippery slope. Arthur looked at his wife, unable to recognize the woman he had married. How could she be so cold, so calculating? Victoria, I'm going to be very clear, he said slowly. Starting today, things are going to change in this house. We are going to treat our employees with the respect they deserve. We will pay fair wages and offer decent conditions. If you don't agree with that, we have a serious problem. Her eyes narrowed. Are you threatening me, Arthur? I'm setting new parameters for our marriage, he replied, not backing down. I've spent years ignoring how this house runs, immersed in my business. It was a mistake I will no longer make. Victoria crossed her arms, assessing her husband. All this because of a housekeeper and her brats? She asked with disdain. I never imagined you were so easily manipulated. It's not manipulation to recognize people's humanity, Victoria. It's basic decency. A tense silence settled between them. Through the window, Arthur saw that the rain was starting to ease. He thought of Eleanor and her daughters, of how many times those children had been left outside, exposed to the elements, while he drove through the gate in his luxury car, completely oblivious. I think we need some time apart, Victoria finally said, adjusting her pearl necklace. I'm going to my mother's for a few days, until you come to your senses. Arthur nodded without protest. Perhaps that's for the best. In the following weeks, the Sterling mansion underwent transformations that went far beyond mere decoration. Arthur, for the first time in years, was truly present in his own home. After Victoria left for her mother's residence, he decided to get to know not only Eleanor's situation better, but that of all his employees. One sunny Sunday morning, Arthur drove his car personally to Tower Hamlets. He had told Eleanor he would like to visit her home, and she, though visibly embarrassed, couldn't refuse her employer's request. As he drove through the streets of East London, he observed how the landscape changed drastically. The elegant buildings and mansions of Kensington gave way to simple houses, narrow alleys, and makeshift constructions. Following the directions Eleanor had given him, he parked on a main street and continued on foot down a narrow alley that couldn't accommodate cars. Some children were playing football on a vacant lot, and elderly women chatted at their doorsteps. Many people watched him with curiosity. It wasn't common to see a man in a dress shirt and Italian shoes walking through those parts. Finally, he reached a cluster of small, crowded houses, sharing walls and roofs in a construction that looked more like a labyrinth. Eleanor was waiting for him at the entrance, visibly nervous, wearing a simple dress Arthur had never seen. He realized he was used to seeing her only in her work uniform. "Mr. Sterling," she greeted, surprised that he had actually come. "I'm sorry about the simple place." "Don't worry, Mrs. Vance," he replied with a genuine smile. "Thank you for having me in your home." She led him down a narrow corridor to a door marked with the number 7, the space where Eleanor lived. With her daughters couldn't be called a flat or a house. It was a single room about 15 square meters, with a single small window that barely let in light. There was a double bed against the wall, where the three of them surely slept together, a small table with 2 chairs and an old wooden wardrobe. In one corner they had improvised a kitchen with a 2-burner stove on a plastic table. A tiny bathroom was separated only by a curtain. Grace and Lily were sitting on the floor, drawing in old notebooks. Upon seeing their mother's employer, they quickly stood up, as if they had been trained to behave in front of important visitors. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," they said in unison, with the polite voices Arthur had noticed before. "Good morning, girls," he replied, feeling a lump in his throat as he observed the environment. "What are you drawing?" Lily, always more spontaneous, ran to show him her drawing. "It's our new house," she explained, pointing to a colorful drawing of a large house with a garden. "It has flowers and a swimming pool and a room just for me." Arthur smiled, touched by the girl's imagination. "It's very beautiful, Lily. You draw very well." Grace, more reserved, kept her notebook closed, observing the interaction with watchful eyes. "Can I see yours too, Grace?" Arthur asked gently. The girl hesitated, but eventually opened her notebook. Arthur was surprised by what he saw. They weren't childish drawings, but mathematical calculations, division and multiplication exercises, done neatly in small, organized handwriting. "You like maths?" he asked, genuinely impressed. Grace nodded. "I'm top of my class," she replied without arrogance, simply stating a fact. "I want to be an engineer when I grow up." "An engineer?" Arthur smiled. "That's a great choice. We need more female engineers in this country." The girl smiled shyly, a rare moment when she let her guard down. Eleanor, still uncomfortable with her employer's presence in her humble home, offered him a coffee. Arthur accepted, more to put her at ease than out of a desire for a drink. As she prepared it on the makeshift stove, Arthur observed the walls of the small room. They were covered with the girl's drawings, but also with magazine clippings of beautiful landscapes, beaches, houses, and gardens. In one corner, there was a small altar with an image of the Virgin Mary and a photo of a young man. Arthur deduced it was Eleanor's late husband. "That was my Joseph," Eleanor confirmed, noticing Arthur's gaze. She served the coffee in a chipped but impeccably clean cup. "It's been 3 years since he passed." Arthur nodded, not knowing exactly what to say. He took a sip of the coffee, which was surprisingly good. "How did the accident happen?" he asked, choosing his words carefully, aware that the girls were listening. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped in her lap. "He was working on a construction site. In Canary Wharf, you know. A luxury condominium. He was a bricklayer, but he did a bit of everything. One day he was on the scaffolding, on the 12th floor, when the structure gave way." She paused, taking a deep breath. "The scaffolding didn't have the proper safety equipment. The construction company wanted to cut costs. My Joseph fell. He didn't stand a chance." Arthur felt a chill. How many stories like this happened daily in the city, far from the eyes and consciousness of people like him? How many Josephs lost their lives building the very buildings where the rich lived comfortably? Did the construction company pay any compensation? He asked, already guessing the answer. Eleanor shook her head. He was working off the books, hired by the day. They gave us some money for the funeral and nothing more. She gave a sad smile. That's how things work for people like us, Mr. Sterling. A life isn't worth much. Those words hit Arthur like a punch. He looked at the girls, who had returned to their drawings and notebooks, but who were surely absorbing every word of the conversation. Grace especially seemed attentive, as if she were used to carrying the weight of the world on her small shoulders. It shouldn't be like this, he said finally. No one should have to live in fear, without security. Eleanor shrugged, with the fatalism of someone who knows reality too harshly to be deluded. After Joseph was gone, I had to find more work. I was already cleaning houses in the neighborhood here, but it wasn't enough. That's when I got the job at your house, Mr. Sterling. It was a blessing. The salary isn't much, but it's steady, comes in every month. And the second job, at the office? I started a year ago. The money from your house covers the rent and food, but there's nothing left for school supplies, clothes, medicine when the girls get sick. Arthur shook his head, feeling a mixture of admiration and sadness. This woman faced more challenges in a single day than he had in years of comfortable living, and yet she maintained her dignity, raised her daughters with values, and was studying advanced maths with a 7-year-old. Mrs. Vance, I came here today because I want to make some changes, he began, choosing his words carefully. First, I want to double your salary starting next month. The housekeeper's eyes widened. Double? Yes, and reduce your workday to 6 hours, Monday to Friday, with all employment rights, a proper contract, holiday pay, pension contributions, national insurance. Eleanor seemed unable to believe what she was hearing. But why? She asked, confused. Because it's fair, Arthur replied simply. You work hard, Mrs. Vance. You deserve to be compensated properly. Did Mrs. Victoria agree to this? She asked suspiciously. Arthur hesitated for a moment. My wife and I are redefining some things at the moment, but don't worry, this decision is final. Eleanor nodded, still, looking unsure. Arthur continued. There's something else. I noticed you're living a bit cramped here. I have an empty flat in Islington. It's nothing luxurious, but it has 2 bedrooms, a living room, a full kitchen. It's a 20-minute bus ride from my house. I'd like you to move there. Now Eleanor looked truly shocked. Move? To a flat of yours? I can't accept that, Mr. Sterling. It's too much. It's not a gift, Mrs. Vance, he clarified. Consider it part of your benefits package. You'll still pay rent, but a symbolic amount. Something comfortable for your budget. Lily, who had apparently been listening to the conversation, approached with shining eyes. Are we getting a new house, Mummy? Like in my drawing? Eleanor seemed torn between her daughter's joy and the fear of accepting something so grand. Mr. Sterling, this is too kind, but... It's not kindness, Mrs. Vance, it's justice, he insisted. And I also have a proposal for the girls. Grace looked up, suddenly interested. I visited some schools this week, and I found a private one not too far from here, with an excellent reputation. The Horizon Academy. They have a scholarship program for talented students. I would like Grace and Lily to study there with all expenses paid. Eleanor brought her hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. A private school for my daughters. Education is the most powerful tool there is, Mrs. Vance, Arthur said, looking at Grace, who was staring at him with a mixture of suspicion and hope. Grace wants to be an engineer, and I'm sure Lily has big dreams too. I want to be a doctor, the little one exclaimed, jumping in place. And a princess in my spare time. Everyone laughed, breaking some of the tension. Mrs. Vance, Arthur continued, more seriously. I know all this seems sudden and I understand your suspicion, but I want you to know it's sincere. Over the past few days, I've been reflecting a lot on my life, on how I built my fortune, on the people who work for me. I realized I was so focused on accumulating money that I forgot what really matters. People. He looked around the small room where 3 lives unfolded in precarious conditions, but with dignity. Seeing your daughters in that storm woke me up. It made me realize how much I've been ignoring, how much I've Closed my eyes to the reality around me. I want to do things differently now. Eleanor finally let tears stream down her face. Mr. Sterling, I don't even know what to say. Say you accept, he replied with a gentle smile, and that you forgive me for not noticing what was happening sooner. The housekeeper wiped her tears with the back of her hands. Of course I accept. I'd be a fool not to. But there's nothing to forgive. You've always been a good employer. You never shouted, never disrespected anyone. Omission is also a form of error, Mrs. Vance. I should have paid more attention. Grace, who had been watching the entire conversation in silence, approached her mother's employer. Her dark, serious eyes studied Arthur's face as if trying to solve a complex puzzle. Why are you doing all this? She asked directly. Rich people don't help people like us without wanting something in return. Grace! Eleanor scolded, embarrassed. Arthur raised his hand, indicating it was okay. It's a fair question, Mrs. Vance, he said, then turned to the girl. I'll tell you why, Grace, because I realized my money means nothing if people around me are suffering. I realized I've built a life based on appearances, on impressing people who don't even really care about me. And you know what else? I realized that your mother, with all her difficulties, is raising two wonderful, intelligent, and polite daughters. That's worth more than all the money in the world. The girl continued to stare at him for a few seconds, and then, slowly, she nodded. If we go to that school, I'll study very hard, she promised seriously. I'll be top of the class there too. I have no doubt about that, Arthur replied, holding back his emotion. As he left Eleanor's home, Arthur felt different. The simple neighborhood, which had initially seemed merely poor and dangerous, now showed other facets. The solidarity among neighbors, the children playing in the streets without needing expensive video games, the simplicity and authenticity of relationships. Of course, the poverty and precariousness were still there, but there was also life, hope, and dignity. Driving back to his mansion in Kensington, he couldn't stop thinking about how many Eleanors existed in London. How many children like Grace and Lily had the potential to be brilliant, but lacked opportunities. How many Josephs lost there, lives building the comfort of the rich. He arrived home with ideas buzzing in his mind. He found Joan, the head housekeeper, coordinating the Sunday tasks. Joan, I need you to gather all the staff tomorrow morning. We're going to have an important conversation. The housekeeper nodded, accustomed to following orders without question. What time, Mr. Sterling? At 9, and I want everyone present, including the gardening staff and the drivers. Yes, sir. Arthur went up to his bedroom and sat on the king-size bed that now seemed absurdly large and unnecessary for one man alone. He looked around at the expensive imported objects that decorated the room. Victoria had always had impeccable taste in decor. He couldn't deny that. Each piece matched perfectly with the others, creating an environment that looked like it was straight out of an architecture magazine. He picked up his phone and saw 3 missed calls from his wife. He took a deep breath before calling her back. Arthur, finally. Victoria's voice sounded irritated on the other end. I've called several times. Where were you? Visiting Eleanor's home in Tower Hamlets, he replied honestly. An incredulous silence followed from the other end of the line. You... what? Victoria finally asked, her voice rising an octave. You went to the slums to visit the housekeeper. Have you completely lost your mind? No, Victoria. I think I've finally regained it, he replied calmly. I went to see how she lives. I wanted to better understand the situation. He heard his wife's exasperated sigh. And what did you discover on your anthropological excursion? That poor people live in small, non-luxurious houses. What a surprise. Victoria's sharp irony, which once amused him, now only saddened him. I discovered that she shares a 15-square-meter room with 2 daughters, that she works practically 18 hours a day to barely afford the rent, that her eldest daughter, only 7 years old, is already studying advanced maths on her own because she wants to be an engineer. How touching, Victoria replied sarcastically. And now you're going to want to adopt the whole family, aren't you? I'm not going to adopt them, but I am going to help them, yes. I've offered her a raise, more reasonable hours, the flat in Islington, and scholarships at a private school for the girls. Another silence, this time longer. When Victoria spoke again, her voice had a dangerous, tone. You didn't consult me about any of this. You're making decisions that affect our assets without my consent. These are decisions I can make on my own, Victoria. It's my money too. So that's how it is, she retorted coldly. After 12 years of marriage, you suddenly decide you can do whatever you want without consulting me. Arthur sighed, tired. It's not about doing what I want, Victoria. It's about doing what's right. And who decides what's right? You? Have you suddenly become a great philanthropist? I'm not trying to be a philanthropist, I'm just trying to be fair. To pay decent wages, to offer humane working conditions. This isn't just about Eleanor, is it? Victoria asked, perceptive as always. It's about us, about our marriage. Arthur hesitated before answering. Maybe it's about everything, Victoria. About who we are, how we live, the values we stand for. And we clearly don't share the same values, she concluded, with a calmness that contrasted with the previous tension. It seems not, Arthur agreed, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief at finally admitting the obvious. I'll call Dr. Harrison tomorrow, Victoria announced, referring to her lawyer. I think we need to discuss the terms of our separation. Arthur nodded, momentarily forgetting she couldn't see him over the phone. Yes, he finally said. I think that's for the best. After hanging up, Arthur sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, watching night fall over London. Outside, the city lit up, millions of tiny lights dotting the darkness. He thought about how many stories were unfolding at that very moment, how many Eleanors, how many Graces and Lilies, fighting to survive, to study, to get a chance. He couldn't change the whole world, but he could change his small piece of it, and that, he decided, was a start. The next morning, the staff of the Sterling mansion gathered in the dining room, as Arthur had requested. It was a diverse group. Joan, the middle-aged head housekeeper, Martha, the cook, Eleanor, still visibly emotional after her employer's visit the previous day, Robert and Peter, the drivers, Mr. Anthony, the grey-haired gardener, and 3 other staff members responsible for cleaning and organizing the house. They all seemed apprehensive, some whispering among themselves, trying to guess the reason for this unusual meeting. Promptly at 9 o'clock, Arthur entered the room. He had slept little, having spent much of the night researching employment rights, fair wages, and social programs. He had dark circles under his eyes, but a renewed energy moved him. He greeted each of them by name, something he realized he had never done before, and asked them to sit down. Good morning, everyone, he began, sitting at the head of the table, but leaning forward in a more approachable posture. Thank you for coming. I know it's a busy Monday, and you all have your tasks, but what I'm about to say is important and affects each one of you. The staff exchanged nervous glances. Meetings like this usually meant layoffs or problems. First, I want to apologize, Arthur continued, surprising everyone. To apologize for being an absent employer who delegated the management of the house without concerning myself with your working conditions. That will change as of today. A murmur went through the room. Joan, the longest-serving employee, tilted her head, curious. I recently discovered that the labor practices in this house have not been fair, he went on. Excessive hours, below-market wages, a lack of basic benefits. That ends now. Arthur then detailed the changes. Reduction of the workday to 8 hours with overtime pay when necessary, a 40% salary increase for everyone, proper employment contracts for those who didn't have them, private health insurance, travel allowances, a monthly grocery basket, and 30 days of paid holiday per year. Furthermore, he added, we are establishing an emergency fund for unforeseen situations. If any of you or your family members face health problems or other emergencies, do not hesitate to come to me. The silence in the room was absolute. The staff seemed unable to believe what they were hearing. Mr. Sterling, Joan was the first to speak, her voice trembling with emotion. Forgive the question, but does Mrs. Victoria know about these changes? Arthur took a deep breath before answering. My wife and I are going through a period of re-evaluation in our marriage, but regardless of what happens between us, these changes are final and non-negotiable. This is my house too, and I want it to be a dignified and respectful workplace for everyone. Mr. Anthony, the gardener who rarely spoke, timidly raised his hand, calloused from working with plants. "May I say something, Mr. Sterling?" "Of course, Mr. Anthony, please." The man cleared his throat, fidgeting with his worn cap in his hands. "I've worked here for 8 years. I never complain because I need the job. I support my sick wife and 2 grandchildren my daughter left with me. But I always wondered why you, who seemed like a good man when we crossed paths in the garden, allowed us to be treated." He hesitated, searching for the right word. "Like less than people." Arthur felt the weight of those words. How could he have been so blind for so long? "You are absolutely right, Mr. Anthony. There is no excuse for my negligence. I can only promise that from now on I will do things differently." A younger staff member, Catherine, who worked in cleaning, stood up with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Sterling, with this raise, I'll be able to pay for university. I've been saving for 3 years, but I can never save enough." "What do you want to study, Catherine?" Arthur asked, genuinely interested. "Nursing, Mr. Sterling," she replied, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "It's always been my dream." "Nursing is a noble profession," he replied with a smile. "And if you need additional help with tuition, let me know. We can establish a scholarship, just as we're doing for Mrs. Vance's daughters." The meeting continued for over an hour, with each employee sharing a little about their life, their dreams, their struggles. Arthur listened attentively, taking notes, absorbing the stories that had always been around him but that he had never bothered to know. He discovered that Martha, the cook, had a son with Down syndrome who loved music, that Peter, the younger driver, was studying law at night and dreamed of being a solicitor, that Joan, the discreet head housekeeper, wrote poetry in her spare time and already had a whole notebook of verses she had never published. By the end of the meeting, the atmosphere in the mansion had completely changed. There were smiles, tears of relief, a renewed energy. Arthur felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, the feeling of doing the right thing, of being truly connected with the people around him. When everyone returned to their duties, Eleanor approached him shyly. "Mr. Sterling, may I speak with you for a minute?" "Of course, Mrs. Vance. Shall we go to the study?" Once there, the housekeeper seemed nervous, wringing her hands in her apron. "It's about the flat in Islington," she began. "I spoke with the girls last night. They're very excited, especially Lily. But are you sure you want to do this? I don't want you to regret it later." Arthur smiled, understanding her concern. "Absolutely sure, Mrs. Vance. In fact, I've already asked Peter to get some boxes for the move. Whenever you want to visit the flat, just let me know. I have the keys." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Sterling. This will change my girls' lives." "No need to thank me. I'm just correcting an injustice I allowed for too long." Eleanor nodded, wiping her tears. "May I ask something personal?" "Of course." "What will happen with Mrs. Victoria and you? The staff are talking." Arthur sighed. He knew it would be impossible to hide the situation, especially in a house with so many people. "We will probably separate, Mrs. Vance. We've realized we have very different values." The housekeeper looked down, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. I didn't want to be the cause of problems in your marriage." "You are not the cause, Mrs. Vance," he assured her firmly. "At most, you were the catalyst for me to see something that had been wrong for a long time. My marriage to Victoria was always more of a convenient arrangement than a true union. I brought the money, and she brought the traditional surname and social connections. It worked for a while, but it wasn't real." Eleanor nodded as if she understood perfectly what he was talking about. "My Joseph and I had nothing when we got married," she commented with a nostalgic smile. "Our first sofa was made of old crates, but we were happy." He looked at me, as if I were the queen of the world. Arthur smiled, touched by the simplicity and depth of those words. "That's a real marriage, Mrs. Vance, something that, unfortunately, Victoria and I never had." The morning turned into afternoon, and Arthur returned his focus to work. He had a company to run, after all, but for the first time in years, he didn't stay at the office late. At 5:30, he was back at the mansion. He found Eleanor in the kitchen, getting ready to leave. Her daughters were with her, sitting at the table doing their homework. Lily was drawing with new colored pencils, clearly just bought. while Grace solved maths problems with her brow furrowed in concentration. "Good afternoon," Arthur greeted, feeling strangely comfortable in this environment he once rarely frequented. "Mr. Sterling!" Eleanor exclaimed, surprised to see him so early. "Did something happen?" "Nothing special. I just decided it's time to spend more time at home," he replied with a smile. He approached the table. "How's the homework, girls?" Lily held up her drawing proudly. "I drew our family. Look, this is Mummy, this is me, this is Grace, and this is Daddy up in heaven." Arthur felt a lump in his throat as he looked at the colourful stick figures, especially the Daddy floating among blue clouds. "It's very beautiful, Lily. You have talent." Grace didn't look up from her homework, but Arthur noticed she was biting her lip, seeming frustrated with a problem. "Can I help?" he offered, sitting down beside her. The girl hesitated, then pushed her notebook towards him. "It's an equation. The teacher taught it today, but I can't solve it." Arthur examined the exercise, a simple first-degree equation, the kind he used to solve when he was 10. For Grace, at only 7, it was a considerable challenge. "Shall we solve it together?" he proposed. For the next 20 minutes, Arthur guided the girl through the mathematical reasoning, explaining each step, encouraging her to think for herself. He was impressed by how quickly she grasped the concepts, by the brilliant intelligence behind those serious eyes. When they finally reached the answer, Grace allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. "I get it. It wasn't that hard." "You're very smart, Grace," Arthur praised sincerely. "You'll be an excellent engineer one day." For the first time since he had met her, he saw the girl smile genuinely without reservation. It was as if a ray of sunshine had illuminated her usually serious little face. As Eleanor finished packing her things, Arthur had an idea. "Have you had dinner?" "We'll eat at home, Mr. Sterling," Eleanor replied quickly. "We don't want to be a bother." "It's no bother at all. Why don't you have dinner here today? Martha always prepares enough food for an army, and it would be a pleasure to have company." The invitation surprised everyone. Never had an employer invited the housekeeper and her daughters to dine at his table. It was a breach of protocol, a transgression of the unwritten rules that governed relations between employers and employees in Britain. "I don't know, Mr. Sterling," Eleanor hesitated. "It wouldn't be appropriate." "Why not?" he asked, genuinely curious. "We're all people, aren't we? Besides, I want to hear more about the girls' plans for the new school. I visited the Horizon Academy today, and the headmistress is eager to meet them." Lily jumped for joy. "Let's, Mummy. I want to see what it's like to eat at a rich person's table." The child's spontaneity made everyone laugh, breaking the tension. Eleanor finally agreed, though still visibly uncomfortable. Arthur asked Martha to set the dining room table for 4. The cook seemed surprised, but didn't question it. An hour later, they were all seated at the imposing mahogany table that was rarely used. Arthur usually ate in his study when he remembered to eat at all. The dinner was initially awkward, with Eleanor tense, afraid of breaking one of the fine china plates or knocking over the crystal glasses. But as the meal progressed, a delicious beef stroganoff with rice and fries that had Lily making a mess, the atmosphere relaxed. Arthur told stories of his simple childhood in rural Yorkshire, making the girls laugh with his mischievous boyhood adventures. Eleanor, gradually more at ease, shared memories of her youth in the northeast before migrating to London in search of opportunities. At the end of the meal, when Martha served ice cream for dessert, Grace looked directly at Arthur and asked the question that had apparently been bothering her all evening. "Why are you alone? Where is your wife?" "Grace!" Eleanor scolded, mortified by her daughter's indiscretion. "It's all right, Mrs. Vance," Arthur reassured her. He looked at the girl and answered honestly, "My wife is at her mother's house. We are re-evaluating our marriage." "Are you going to get divorced?" Grace continued, ignoring her mother's warning look. Arthur sighed. "Probably, yes. Sometimes people discover they have very different values, that they want different things from life." "Like what?" the girl insisted. Arthur thought for a moment before answering. "Well, I've discovered that I want a home where all people are treated with respect and dignity, regardless of how much money they have or what job they do. and I want to use what I've achieved to help others have opportunities. My wife thinks differently. Grace nodded seriously, absorbing the explanation. She doesn't like poor people, she concluded, with the brutal frankness of children. Grace! Eleanor exclaimed, horrified. Arthur couldn't help but laugh, despite the bluntness of the observation. It's not that simple, he replied diplomatically. But yes, Victoria has difficulty relating to people from different social classes. It's not entirely her fault. It's how she was raised. Lily, who had been quiet until then, focused on her ice cream, looked up. Are you sad because she left? The question, asked with genuine childish concern, touched Arthur. A little, he admitted, surprising himself. With his honesty, it's always sad when a relationship ends, but sometimes it's necessary so that people can find paths that make them happier. Eleanor seemed uncomfortable with the turn of the conversation, but Arthur found the children's sincerity refreshing. It was a welcome contrast to the world of appearances and half-truths he had lived in for the past few years. After dinner, Arthur insisted that Robert, the driver, take the three of them home. The very next day, they would visit the flat in Islington, and in a few days the move would be complete. When he was alone, in the immense mansion, Arthur felt strangely at peace, despite the enormous changes happening in his life. His marriage was ending, his relationship with his staff transformed, his worldview turned upside down. And yet, for the first time in a long time, he felt authentic, true to himself. That night before sleeping, his phone rang. It was Dr. Harrison, Victoria's lawyer. Good evening, Arthur. The formal, controlled voice sounded from the other end of the line. I hope I'm not calling too late. It's fine, Harrison. I imagine Victoria has already spoken with you. Yes, we had a long conversation. Today, the lawyer confirmed. She has asked me to initiate separation proceedings. I would like to know if you intend to contest or if we can proceed amicably. Arthur took a deep breath. It was surreal to discuss the end of a 12-year marriage with such bureaucratic coldness, but in a way it matched the kind of relationship he and Victoria had built. I won't contest, he replied. We can resolve this as amicably as possible. Excellent. Regarding the financial terms, Victoria mentioned some concerns. Something about changes you are allegedly implementing unilaterally that would affect the marital assets. Arthur felt his blood heat up. If you're referring to the salary increases and improvements in working conditions for the staff, that is not up for negotiation. The lawyer cleared his throat, uncomfortable. I see. And what about the flat in Islington? Victoria mentioned you intend to cede the property to a housekeeper. I'm not ceding it, Harrison. I'm offering a subsidized rent as part of a benefits package, and that flat was purchased with my own money, even before the marriage. It is not part of the marital assets. I understand, the lawyer replied in a tone that suggested he was taking notes. And the scholarships for the employees' daughters? Also non-negotiable. These are commitments I have made, and I intend to honor them. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Arthur, speaking as your longtime friend, and not as Victoria's lawyer right now, what is going on? These actions are not typical of you. Arthur reflected for a moment. Harrison had known him for almost 20 years, since the days when his company was just a small startup struggling to survive. Let's just say I've had an epiphany, Harrison. I realized I was building a life based on values that aren't really mine. I realized I had become the very type of person I despised when I was young, someone who only cares about money, status, and appearances. The lawyer murmured, sounding suspicious. And this epiphany happened exactly when you discovered your housekeeper and her daughters in the rain? Yes, Arthur confirmed. It was like a slap in the face, a wake-up call to the reality I had been ignoring for years. I see, Harrison said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Well, I will convey your position to Victoria, but I must warn you she is not willing to accept all these changes without a fight. She can fight as much as she wants, Harrison. My decision is made. After hanging up, Arthur stared at the bedroom ceiling for a long time. He knew he would face resistance, not just from Victoria, but from the entire social circle they had built over the years. People like them didn't just wake up to social inequality and change their lives overnight. They were expected to maintain the status quo, to continue playing the game of appearances and privilege. But something had changed within him, something fundamental and irreversible. He could no longer pretend not to see the glaring disparity between his world of luxury and the real world where people like Eleanor fought daily for survival. He could no longer justify to himself the exploitation disguised as tradition, or that's just how things are. And if that meant losing friends, business contacts, or social status, so be it. For the first time in many years, Arthur felt he was on the right path, living according to values that truly mattered. And that, he concluded as sleep finally came, was worth more than all the gala, dinners and luxury cars in the world. The following weeks brought accelerated changes for both the Sterling mansion and Eleanor's family. The flat in Islington, which had been empty for years, came to life. It was a 2-bedroom property in a simple but well-maintained building, with a 24-hour porter and a small communal garden. For Eleanor and her daughters, accustomed to the cramped room in Tower Hamlets, it seemed like a palace. The move happened on a sunny Saturday. Arthur made a point of being there, helping to carry the few boxes of the family's belongings. He was surprised by how few material possessions Eleanor had accumulated over years of hard work. Some clothes, basic kitchen utensils, the girls' notebooks, a small old television, and the altar with the image of the Virgin Mary and the photo of her late husband. "It's going to look very empty," she commented, embarrassed, seeing her things occupy only one corner of the spacious living room. "Not for long," Arthur replied with a smile. "Robert is bringing some things I set aside from the house. Furniture that was in storage, appliances I don't use, if you don't mind, of course." "Mr. Sterling, you're already doing too much. These are things that were just sitting there, Mrs. Vance. Better that they're useful to someone." When Robert arrived with the small van, Eleanor couldn't hold back her tears. There was a new refrigerator, a sofa in perfect condition, beds for the girls, a dining table, chairs, and even a used but well-functioning computer. "For Grace to do her research and study," Arthur explained, while Peter, the younger driver who was good with technology, set up the equipment. Lily ran through the flat, amazed by the space, especially the room she would share with her sister. Grace, always more restrained, inspected each room with analytical eyes as if she couldn't believe this was really theirs. "Are you sure we can stay here, Mum?" she asked when they were alone in the kitchen. "What if the boss changes his mind?" Eleanor hugged her daughter, understanding her fears. Life had always taught them that good things rarely lasted, that one should be wary of others' generosity. "Mr. Sterling is a man of his word, darling. He promised, and we have a contract. This is our home now." Adjusting to the new life wasn't instantaneous. Eleanor still woke up at 5 in the morning out of habit, even though her workday now began at 8. The girls still hoarded food in their rooms, fearing it would run out, as they did in the tenement. Small traumas from a life of scarcity that would take time to heal. At the Sterling mansion, the transformations were equally profound. Victoria had removed all her personal belongings, taking them to her mother's house. The separation process was moving forward, with lawyers negotiating the terms. Arthur remained firm in his decisions about the staff and the support for Eleanor's family, which led to heated conflicts during the hearings. "He's having a nervous breakdown," Victoria argued to anyone who would listen over lunches with her socialite friends. "Giving our money to the help, treating employees as if they were family. It's absurd." But Arthur remained unshakable. For the first time, the mansion became a genuinely pleasant place to live. The staff, treated with respect and paid fairly, worked with more dedication and joy. Joan, the head housekeeper, commented that in 20 years in the profession, she had never seen a house run so harmoniously. A particularly interesting transformation occurred in Arthur's routine. Previously absorbed by work, spending entire days at the office and rarely appearing at home, he now made a point of being present. He returned for dinner almost every night, had lunch at home whenever possible, and on Saturdays worked half a day at most. "You seem different, Mr. Sterling," Martha commented as she served breakfast one Thursday morning. "You've even put on a little weight. You look like you're sleeping better." Arthur laughed, patting his stomach, which was indeed a little less defined. "Your cooking is just too good, Martha. And yes, I am sleeping better. I think I've finally found some kind of peace." The truth was that the change in his life went beyond the practical matters of schedules and routines. It was an internal transformation, a reconnection with values that had always been there but had been buried under years of unbridled ambition and the pursuit of status. Now, at 45, Arthur was rediscovering the young idealist he had once been before fortune and corporate success. One afternoon, he received an unexpected call. It was Grace, Eleanor's eldest daughter, using the landline he had installed in the flat. "Mr. Sterling?" The childish voice sounded hesitant on the other end of the line. "It's Grace." "Hi, Grace. Is everything all right?" he replied, genuinely happy to hear from her. "Yes, She paused, clearly nervous. "Can you help me with a maths problem? It's for tomorrow, and my mum doesn't know how to solve it." Arthur smiled, touched by the trust the girl showed. "Of course I can. Do you want me to come over, or would you prefer to explain it over the phone?" "If you could come. It has formulas. It's hard to explain by talking." "I'll be there in half an hour. Is that okay?" When he arrived, at the flat in Islington, Arthur was greeted by a visibly embarrassed Eleanor. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. Sterling. I told Grace she shouldn't disturb you, but she insisted." "It's no bother at all, Mrs. Vance," he assured her. "I'm happy to help." "Where's the little maths genius?" Grace was waiting at the living room table, surrounded by notebooks and books. When she saw Arthur, her serious eyes lit up slightly, but she maintained her composure. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Sterling. It's a pleasure. So what's the problem that's challenging you?" The question was about geometry, something beyond the normal curriculum for a child her age. The private school where the girls had been enrolled offered an advanced program for students with special aptitude in certain subjects, and Grace, as predicted, had excelled in maths. For nearly an hour, Arthur sat beside her, explaining concepts, drawing figures, guiding her through the reasoning without giving the answers away. It was refreshing to see the girl's agile mind connecting the dots, making discoveries, advancing in her understanding. "I got it," she exclaimed finally, with a rare and precious smile. "It wasn't that hard." "You are extremely intelligent, Grace," Arthur praised, sincerely. "You have an impressive logical reasoning for someone your age. How are you doing at the new school?" "Well," she replied, returning to her usual seriousness. "I got top marks in all subjects in the first term, and I'm on the chess team." "Chess? That's fantastic. I used to play when I was young." "We could play a game sometime," she suggested, with a confidence that made Arthur smile. "It would be an honor, but I warn you, I'm not that easy to beat." "Neither am I," Grace retorted, with a seriousness that didn't match her 7 years. Lily, who had been watching television, approached shyly. "Mr. Sterling, do you want to see my new drawing?" she asked, holding a sheet of paper. "Of course, Lily." The drawing showed 5 figures holding hands: Eleanor, Lily, Grace, Daddy in heaven as a floating figure with wings, and a man in a suit next to Eleanor. "It's our family," Lily explained. "This is you!" She pointed to the figure in the suit. Arthur felt a tightness in his chest, moved and at the same time concerned about the interpretation the girl was making of his role in their lives. Eleanor, who was watching the scene, looked mortified. "Lily, Mr. Sterling isn't our family, he's Mummy's boss," she corrected, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling, she gets things mixed up." "It's no problem at all, Mrs. Vance," he reassured her, though he felt a similar embarrassment. "It's natural for children to see the world differently." Lily, however, seemed confused by her mother's reprimand. "But Uncle Arthur comes here, helps Grace with her homework, brought the furniture, takes us to the shopping center. What is that if not family?" The innocence of the question left the adults speechless. Indeed, Arthur had become a constant presence in their lives. Over the last 2 months, he had helped Grace with her homework several times, taken the girls on weekend outings, attended the school's parents' evening, and even spent a whole Sunday with them in Hyde Park. "It's complicated, sweetheart, Eleanor finally said, stroking her little one's curly hair. "Mr. Sterling is a very special friend who has been helping us a lot, but he has his own life, you understand?" Lily seemed to accept the explanation, though not entirely convinced. Arthur, for his part, felt uncomfortably aware of the ambiguity of his position in that family. He was Eleanor's employer, yes, but in recent months he had become involved in their lives in a way that went far beyond the traditional professional relationship. After dinner, which he ended up sharing with them at Eleanor's insistent invitation, Arthur was preparing to leave when the housekeeper walked him to the door. "Mr. Sterling, may I say something?" she asked, sounding nervous. "Of course, Mrs. Vance." "The girls are getting very attached to you," she began, choosing her words carefully. "Especially Lily, who is younger and misses her father more. I don't want them to get hurt when you move on with your life, when you meet someone new, start a family." Arthur understood her concern. It was legitimate and came from a mother's protective instinct. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Vance, and I apologize if my presence has caused any confusion for the girls. That was not my intention." "Oh, it's not that," she hurried to clarify. "You have been wonderful with them. I never imagined they would have such a positive male figure in their lives after Joseph passed. It's just that I'm afraid of what will happen when this ends." Arthur reflected for a moment before answering. "I don't know what the future holds, Mrs. Vance, but I can assure you of one thing. I am not just going to disappear from your lives. What we have built, this friendship, this mutual support, is genuine for me." Eleanor nodded, seeming a little more at ease but still worried. "I just don't want you to feel obligated. You've already done so much for us." Arthur smiled, gently touching her shoulder. "It's not an obligation, Mrs. Vance, it's a choice. Being with you, helping Grace with her homework, listening to Lily's crazy stories has brought me more joy than any business cocktail or dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant. You've reminded me what it means to be truly human." Eleanor's eyes shone with unshed tears, and she just nodded in silence. No more words were needed. The following week, Arthur's life took an unexpected turn. During a business meeting, he received a call from his head housekeeper, Joan. "Mr. Sterling, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's urgent. Mrs. Vance has had an accident." Arthur's blood ran cold. "What? How? Is she okay?" "She slipped on the wet stairs in the service area, Mr. Sterling. She fell badly. Robert has taken her to the hospital. It looks like she's broken her arm." "And the girls?" he asked immediately, already grabbing his car keys. "They're at school. Mrs. Vance is worried about who will pick them up. She said a neighbor usually gets them when she's late, but the woman can't today." "I'll get them myself," Arthur decided without hesitation. "Let me know which hospital Eleanor is in. I'm heading there now." He abandoned the meeting midway, leaving confused executives and investors behind. Half an hour later, he was at the hospital, a public NHS facility in South London. He found Eleanor in the emergency room, being attended to by a nurse. Her right arm was in a sling, and she looked pale but conscious. "Mr. Sterling," she exclaimed, surprised. "You didn't have to come." "Of course I did, Mrs. Vance. How are you feeling?" "It hurts a bit, but it will pass," she replied, with the resilience of someone used to enduring pain and hardship. "The doctor said it's broken in 2 places. I'll need surgery." "Surgery?" Arthur repeated, worried. "Yes, to put in pins, but I have to wait for a slot. It could take a few days." Arthur frowned. He knew how the public health system worked in the UK, with its endless waiting lists and limited resources. "No way. I'm transferring you to a private hospital right now." "Mr. Sterling, you don't have to. I'm already causing too much trouble." "It's no trouble at all, Mrs. Vance. Besides, the sooner you have this surgery, the sooner you can recover. And the girls need you." At the mention of her daughters, Eleanor seemed even more distressed. "Oh God, the girls. Who will take care of them while I'm in the hospital? Who will take them to school, cook for them?" "Don't worry about that now," Arthur reassured her. "I'll pick them up from school and explain the situation. They can stay at the mansion while you're in hospital. I have plenty of spare rooms, and Martha will love having children to spoil with her recipes." "I don't want to be a burden." "Mrs. Vance," Arthur interrupted with gentle firmness, "you need to understand once and for all, You are not a burden to me. You are people I care about deeply, so please let me help." A few hours later, Eleanor was settled in a private room in one of London's best hospitals. The surgery was scheduled for the next day with one of the city's top orthopedic surgeons. Arthur had personally ensured she received the best possible care. Next, he drove to the girls' school. The Horizon Academy was a traditional educational institution with a leafy campus and modern facilities. When he identified himself at reception, he was treated with the deference reserved for major donors. After all, he was the one paying for Eleanor's daughter's full scholarships. He explained the situation to the head of pastoral care, who immediately arranged for Grace and Lily to be called. The girls arrived at the office with confused expressions, which turned to joy upon seeing Arthur. "Uncle Arthur!" Lily exclaimed, running to hug him. Grace, always more reserved, just smiled shyly. "Did you come to pick us up today?" Arthur felt a lump in his throat. How could he explain to two children that their mother had had an accident? "Yes, I came to get you because I have some news," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Your mum had a small accident at work today. She's okay, but she's broken her arm and will need to stay in the hospital for a few days." Lily's eyes immediately filled with tears. "Is Mummy hurt?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, sweetie, but she's going to be fine very soon," Arthur assured her, crouching down to be at the girl's level. "The doctors will take great care of her, and in a few days she'll be back." Grace, on the other hand, maintained a serious expression, her eyes fixed on Arthur as if trying to determine if he was telling the truth or downplaying the situation to protect them. "Is it serious?" she asked directly. "No. Grace, it's a broken arm. It hurts and it will require surgery, but it's nothing life-threatening," he answered honestly, knowing the girl valued the truth. "And where will we stay while she's in the hospital?" Grace continued, always practical. "You'll stay at my house. I have rooms prepared for you, and everyone there is excited to have you. Martha is already planning to make that chocolate cake you love, and Joan has set aside some board games for the evenings." Lily seemed to cheer up at the prospect. "We're going to stay in the mansion like princesses." Arthur laughed, relieved. To see the little one was already getting over the initial shock. "Exactly like princesses." Grace, however, still looked worried. "Can we visit Mum in the hospital?" "Of course you can. Tomorrow, after school, we'll go straight there, and you can talk to her on the phone any time." The girls were taken to get their backpacks and belongings, while Arthur signed the necessary forms, authorizing him to collect them from school. The teacher observed the interaction with interest. "You seem very close to the girls, Mr. Sterling," Arthur smiled. "Yes, we've become good friends over the last few months." "It's rare to see an—" She hesitated as if searching for the right word. "An employer so involved with an employee's family. Perhaps it's time we reconsidered these labels of employer and employee," he replied calmly. "At the end of the day, we're all just people trying to do the best we can with what we have." The teacher nodded, though her expression indicated she didn't fully understand the nature of this unconventional relationship. Upon arriving at the Sterling mansion, the staff were already prepared to welcome the girls. Joan had made up 2 adjoining guest rooms, one for each girl, though she suspected they would end up sleeping together anyway. Martha had prepared a special snack, and even Mr. Anthony, the gardener, had picked fresh flowers to place on the bedside tables. "Wow!" Lily exclaimed, upon entering the room that would be hers for a few days. "It's bigger than our whole flat." Grace, more subdued, thanked everyone politely, but Arthur noticed her eyes were worried, likely thinking about her mother. That evening after dinner, Arthur took the girls to call Eleanor at the hospital. She had already been medicated for the next day's surgery, but she managed to reassure her daughters, telling them she was fine and would be home soon. Later, when the girls were in their rooms getting ready for bed, Arthur went to say goodnight. He found Lily already in bed, but with her eyes wide open, hugging a teddy bear that Joan had found among the toys stored in the mansion. "All right, Princess?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Uncle Arthur, is Mummy really going to be okay?" she asked, with the childish frankness that went straight to the point. "Yes, she is, Lily. Breaking an arm hurts, but it gets better. In a few weeks, she'll be doing everything normally again." The girl seemed to reflect on this for a moment. "When Daddy got hurt, he didn't come back," she said finally. with a sad wisdom that broke Arthur's heart. "Oh, Lily," he hesitated, searching for the right words. "Your dad's accident was very different, much more serious. Your mum's is like when you fall off your bike and scrape your knee. It hurts, it needs care, but then it heals." She nodded, seeming a little more at ease. "Can I ask you something, Uncle Arthur?" "Of course, sweetie. Anything." "Can you—" "Stay here until I fall asleep. I'm a little bit scared." Arthur felt a wave of tenderness. "Of course I can." He sat more comfortably on the edge of the bed and began to tell a story he made up on the spot, about a brave princess who ventured through an enchanted forest. Before he even got halfway through the narrative, Lily had already fallen asleep, her breathing soft and regular. As he left the room, he found Grace in the hallway, still dressed, with a maths book in her hands. "Not going to sleep, Grace?" "I'm studying," she replied. "Seriously?" "I have an important test tomorrow." Arthur admired the girl's discipline, but worried about her emotional state. "Are you worried about your mum?" he asked directly, knowing Grace valued honesty. She hesitated, then nodded. "If something happens to her, what will happen to us?" The question, so direct and raw, revealed the deep fear hidden behind Grace's strong facade. At 7, she already carried the weight of responsibility, the fear of abandonment, the awareness of life's fragility. "Grace, look at me," Arthur requested, crouching down to be at her eye level. "Your mum is going to be fine. I promise. But even if someday in the future something were to happen to her, which it won't for a long, long time because she's young and healthy, you and Lily will never be alone. Ever." "Do you promise?" she asked with a rare vulnerability. "I promise," he replied without hesitation. And at that moment, looking into the serious, hopeful eyes of this child who had suffered too many losses for her age, Arthur knew he would do anything to keep that promise. 6 months had passed since Eleanor's accident. The surgery had been a success, and after 4 weeks of recovery, she had returned to work at the mansion, albeit with adapted duties while her arm finished strengthening. During that period, the girls stayed with Arthur for 2 weeks, creating even stronger bonds with the businessman and the other staff members. The divorce between Arthur and Victoria had been finalized 3 months ago, with more drama and society column headlines than he would have liked. "Millionaire has philanthropic breakdown, leaves wife for housekeeper," read one of the more sensationalist headlines. Arthur chose to ignore the rumors and gossip, focusing on the positive transformations in his life and the lives of those around him. On a sunny Saturday morning, Arthur woke up early, excited for the day ahead. It was Grace's 8th birthday, and he had promised a special party. Not something ostentatious, the girl detested extravagance, but a meaningful celebration with the people she loved. He went down to the kitchen, where Martha was already preparing a chocolate cake with fudge filling, the birthday girl's favorite. "Good morning, Martha. That cake smells wonderful." The cook smiled proudly. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling. I'm putting my all into it. Grace deserves it. That girl is special, isn't she?" "Very special," he agreed, pouring himself a coffee. "Have the decorations arrived?" "Yes, Joan has put everything in the games room. It's a science theme, isn't it, with planets and numbers?" Arthur laughed. Grace had been specific about what she wanted. No princesses or unicorns, like other girls her age. She wanted a space-themed party with elements of astronomy and mathematics. "Exactly. Our little scientist is becoming more and more focused on her dream of being an engineer. Now she wants to be an aerospace engineer, to design rockets." As he drank his coffee, his phone rang. It was Eleanor. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling. We're almost ready here. The birthday girl is super excited, although she tries not to show it as always." "I can imagine," he laughed. "The cake is already in the oven, and Robert is going to pick up the snacks soon. What time will you arrive?" "Around 11 a.m., is that all right? Lily is still finishing the present she made for her sister." "Perfect, we'll be waiting." After hanging up, Arthur reflected on how his relationship with Eleanor had evolved in recent months. It was no longer a simple employer-employee relationship, but a genuine friendship, based on mutual respect and affection. She continued to work at the mansion, but now as a sort of house manager, coordinating the other staff with flexible hours that allowed her to better follow her daughter's school life. Eleanor had revealed herself to be a natural administrator, reorganizing processes in the mansion, improving efficiency and the work environment. Arthur had even joked that he should hire her for his company, to which she replied in her simple and direct way, "One day, maybe. First, I want to finish my studies." Because that was another significant development. At 35, Eleanor had returned to her studies, enrolled in an evening course. To complete her secondary education, she studied 3 nights a week, determined to earn her diploma. "I want my daughters to see that it's never too late to learn, to grow," she had explained, when Arthur encouraged her to follow this path. At 11 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Joan hurried to answer, and soon the excited voices of Eleanor and Lily filled the entrance hall. Grace followed a little behind, serious as ever, but with a special sparkle in her dark eyes, the kind of restrained excitement that was her trademark. "Happy birthday, Grace," Arthur exclaimed, approaching to hug her. The girl allowed the hug, briefly returning it before pulling away with a shy smile. "Thank you, Uncle Arthur," she said, using the address that Lily had spontaneously adopted months before, and which gradually she had also begun to use. "Come and see the decorations. I think you'll like them." Grace's eyes widened when she entered the games room. The ceiling was filled with luminous stars and suspended planets. A banner with the periodic table covered an entire wall, and on the tables, instead of ordinary tablecloths, there were enlarged images of galaxies and nebulas. In a corner, a small exhibition of simple science experiments that could be performed during the party. "Wow!" was all the normally eloquent Grace could say. Lily ran around the room amazed. "This is so cool! Much better than my princess party," she declared, referring to her own birthday party 3 months earlier, when she turned 6 and had a fairy tale-themed celebration. Eleanor watched the scene with an emotional smile. She wore a simple but elegant dress, very different from the uniform she wore when Arthur first met her. Her hair, once always tied in a severe bun, now fell in soft waves over her shoulders. She looked younger, lighter, as if a huge weight had been lifted from her. "You always know exactly what to do to make them happy," she commented, approaching Arthur. "I don't know how to thank you." "Seeing them happy is thanks enough, Mrs. Vance," he replied sincerely. The guests began to arrive shortly after. They were mainly Grace's school friends, members of the maths club and the chess team, children as intellectually oriented as she was. Some neighbors from their building in Islington also came, along with staff from the mansion and their families, and 2 teachers particularly dear to Grace. Arthur watched the birthday girl interact with her friends, enthusiastically explaining an experiment on density that he had prepared. She was no longer the suspicious, withdrawn girl he had met 6 months earlier, although she still maintained her characteristic seriousness. There was now a quiet confidence in her, a contained joy that occasionally erupted into genuine laughter. Lily, on the other hand, circulated among the guests with the flair of a natural little hostess, offering snacks, showing off the decorations, making everyone feel welcome. Her extroverted and affectionate personality won hearts instantly. "She's so much like her father," commented Eleanor, who had approached Arthur again. "Joseph was like that, talked to everyone, made friends anywhere. Grace takes after me, more reserved, observant." "They are 2 extraordinary girls, each in her own way," Arthur replied. "You must be very proud of them." "More than you can imagine," Eleanor confirmed, her eyes shining. "And I'm very grateful too. If it weren't for everything you've done for us." "Hey, no getting emotional at the party," he teased, though he also felt a lump in his throat. "Today is a day to celebrate." The afternoon passed amidst games, science experiments, music, and much laughter. When it was time for the cake, everyone sang "Happy Birthday" with enthusiasm, and Grace, normally averse to being the center of attention, allowed herself a broad smile as she blew out the candles. "Did you make a wish?" Lily asked curiously. "I did, but I'm not telling or it won't come true," Grace replied sensibly. "Time for presents," announced Joan, who had arranged a special table for them. Grace received science books, experiment kits, educational games, and even a small telescope, a joint gift from Arthur and Eleanor. But the gift that moved her the most was a simple drawing made by Lily. a colourful representation of the two sisters dressed as scientists, surrounded by mathematical formulas with a rocket in the background. "This is for you to put on your wall when you're a famous scientist. To remember that I always believed in you," Lily explained, with a wisdom beyond her 6 years. Grace, always so restrained, hugged her sister tightly, her eyes welling up. "It's the best present of all, Lily. Thank you." The party continued until early evening, when the last guests began to leave. The girls, exhausted but radiant, helped to collect the wrapping paper and organize the new toys. "You can leave that for tomorrow," Arthur suggested, seeing the tiredness on their little faces. "It's getting late." "You're right," Eleanor agreed. "Come on, girls. Time to go home." "Can't we sleep here tonight?" Lily pleaded with supplicating eyes. "Please?" Eleanor hesitated, looking at Arthur. "I don't want to overstay our welcome." "You know it's no trouble at all," he replied, smiling. "Their rooms are always ready, but the decision is yours, Mrs. Vance." The truth was, in recent months the girls had slept at the mansion several times, sometimes because Eleanor had class at night, and it was more practical other times because Arthur proposed a movie marathon or a stargazing session with the new telescope. Gradually, without anyone planning or announcing it, the Sterling mansion had become a second home for them. "All right," Eleanor agreed, unable to resist Lily's pleading eyes, "but only because it's a special day. Tomorrow we have a lot to organize at the flat." "Yay!" Lily celebrated, while Grace smiled discreetly, equally pleased. Later, after the girls were settled in their rooms, Arthur and Eleanor sat on the veranda overlooking the garden, enjoying the mild evening with a glass of wine. "It was a perfect party," she commented, relaxed. "I've never seen Grace so happy. She deserves it. She's an incredible child." A comfortable silence settled between them. In recent months, they had developed this kind of quiet intimacy, where they could simply enjoy each other's presence without the need for words. "Arthur," Eleanor began, dropping the formal Mr. Sterling she still used occasionally, especially in front of other staff. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Don't you miss your old lifestyle? The parties, the business dinners, the international trips? Since you got to know us better, your life has changed drastically." Arthur reflected before answering, watching the stars begin to dot the night sky. "Honestly, no. That life was empty, Eleanor. I had everything money could buy, but none of what really matters. Genuine connections, purpose, the feeling of making a difference in someone's life." He paused, taking a sip of wine. "You know what I miss sometimes? It's not the dinners in Paris or the yachts in Monaco. It's the naivety. Believing I was building something important, that my success was purely my own merit, that the world's inequalities weren't my problem. It was a comfortable ignorance." Eleanor nodded, understanding. "I see. Sometimes the truth hurts more than the illusion." "Exactly. But I'd rather have the pain of the truth 1,000 times over than the comfort of a lie." Another silence settled, this one a little more charged with something unsaid. "And you?" Arthur finally asked. "Do you regret letting me so far into your lives, accepting my help, my constant presence?" Eleanor looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the soft light of the garden lamps. "Not for a second," she replied with conviction. "What you've done for us is beyond any words of gratitude. You've given my daughters not just material comfort, but hope, possibilities, a future I could never have provided alone." She hesitated before continuing. "In the beginning, I admit I was scared. Scared it was just a passing whim, that one day you'd get tired of us, that the girls would get hurt when that happened. But I've learned to trust you, Arthur, your sincerity, your commitment. I will never abandon you," he affirmed fervently. "You've become part of my life, an essential part." The look they exchanged contained much more than words could express. There was a feeling growing between them, something they both recognized but had not yet named or directly confronted. The moment was interrupted by Lily, who appeared at the veranda door in her pajamas, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Uncle Arthur, you promised to read me a story," she reminded him in a whiny voice. He smiled, standing up. That's right, I did. Let's go, Princess. Eleanor also stood up. It's late, Lily. Uncle Arthur can read the story tomorrow. But he promised, the little one insisted with a stubborn pout. It's no problem, Eleanor, Arthur assured her. I love reading to them, and a promise is a promise. He followed Lily to the bedroom where Grace was already settled, flipping through a book about the solar system she had received as a gift. He sat between the two beds and began to read a story about a girl who dreamed of traveling to the stars. His deep, melodious voice soon lulled Lily to sleep, but Grace remained attentive until the end. When he finished, she looked at him with those piercing eyes that seemed to see far beyond what most children her age could. Uncle Arthur, she began hesitantly, can I ask you something? Of course, Grace, anything. Do you like my mum? The question, so direct and unexpected, caught Arthur off guard. Of course I like her. Very much. Your mum is a wonderful person. Grace shook her head, impatient with the evasive answer. Not like that. Do you like her like a man likes a woman? Arthur felt his face heat up. How could he explain the complexity of adult feelings to an 8-year-old child? Why do you ask, Grace? Because I see how you look at her, she replied simply. It's different from how you look at other people, and she looks at you differently too. Arthur smiled, impressed once again by the girl's sharp perception. Your mum is very special to me, Grace. Very special indeed. And yes, my feelings for her are different, but it's complicated. Why? She persisted. Is it because you were rich and she worked for you, because that's silly? My teacher said everyone is equal in value, no matter how much money they have. Arthur almost laughed at the simple, accurate logic. Your teacher is right, but sometimes adults have trouble seeing things that clearly. We need time to understand our feelings, to be sure of what we want. Do you understand? Grace seemed to reflect deeply before answering, sort of. But if you like her and she likes you, why is it so difficult? That's a great question, Grace. A question many adults ask themselves too. The girl yawned, finally succumbing to tiredness. Well, if you want my opinion, she said, settling under the covers, I think you should be together. Mum smiles more when you're around, and so do you. With that surprising declaration, she closed her eyes and soon fell asleep, leaving Arthur sitting there between the two beds with much more to think about than when he had entered the room to tell a simple bedtime story. Back on the veranda, he found Eleanor still sitting, contemplating the stars. Are they both asleep? She asked, smiling. Yes, he replied, resuming his seat. Lily passed out mid-story, but Grace held on until the end, and she still had the energy for a rather interesting conversation. Uh-oh. Knowing my daughter, should I be worried? Arthur laughed, but he felt his heart race. She asked if I like you, he said, deciding to be direct. Like a man. Likes a woman were her exact words. Eleanor choked on the wine she was drinking. My goodness, that girl has no filter, she exclaimed, her face flushed. I'm so sorry, Arthur. I'll talk to her about boundaries and inappropriate questions. You don't have to, he assured her, feeling suddenly brave. In fact, I thought her question was quite pertinent. Eleanor's eyes widened. What do you mean? Well, Grace is very observant. She said she noticed the way I look at you, and the way you look at me. The silence that followed was charged with expectation, with possibilities. And what was your answer? Eleanor finally asked, her voice almost a whisper. Arthur took a deep breath before replying. I told her you are very special to me, that my feelings for you are different. Eleanor looked down, a shy smile playing on her lips. Different how? It was now or never. 6 months of growing feelings, of closeness, of a connection that went far beyond conventional friendship. Different as in, I'm in love with you, Eleanor. The words hung in the night air, heavy with vulnerability and hope. Arthur felt his heart beating so hard he was sure she could hear it. Eleanor looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears and something more, something that looked very much like a reflection of what he himself felt. Arthur, she began, her voice failing. I have feelings for you too. Deep feelings. But it's so complicated. Why? He asked, unconsciously echoing Grace's question. Because of our past as employer and employee? Because of the social difference? Yes, all of that, she confirmed. And also because of the girls. They've grown so attached to you. What if it doesn't work out? What if what I feel is just gratitude? Or what you feel is just infatuation? Arthur reached for her hand across the table, lacing his fingers through hers. Eleanor, we've known each other for 10 months. During that time, we've seen the best and worst of each other. What I feel isn't infatuation, and what you feel isn't gratitude. It's something real, built day by day, moment by moment. It's respect, admiration, affection, love. A tear ran down her face, but Eleanor was smiling. I'm scared, Arthur. Scared to give in to this feeling and then lose everything. I've already lost so much in life. I'm scared too, he admitted. Scared I won't be the man you and the girls deserve. Scared of disappointing you. But I've learned that life is too short to live in fear. We have to take risks for what really matters. Slowly, as if performing a movement long rehearsed in dreams, Arthur leaned forward. Eleanor did the same, and their lips met in a soft, delicate kiss, full of promise. When they parted, they were both smiling, a mixture of relief and joy on their faces. So, what do we do now? She asked, still holding his hand. One day at a time, Arthur replied. No rush, no pressure. We'll discover what the future holds for us together. Eleanor nodded, squeezing his hand affectionately. One day at a time, she agreed, but together. They stayed there, under the starry sky, sharing the comfortable silence of two people who had finally found the place where they belonged, beside each other. Grace Vance Sterling. The name echoed through the crowded auditorium, followed by an explosion of applause. Arthur squeezed the hand of Eleanor, sitting beside him, both with tears in their eyes as they watched the young 22-year-old woman, in cap and gown, walk confidently across the stage to receive her degree in aerospace engineering from Imperial College London. 15 years had passed since that rainy afternoon that had forever changed the course of their lives. 15 years of growth, learning, challenges, and above all, love. She did it, Eleanor whispered, her voice thick with emotion. My girl did it. Our girl, Arthur corrected gently, squeezing the gold wedding band on his wife's left hand, and I never had a doubt she would. Determination has always been her middle name. In the front row, Lily, now 21, recorded everything on her phone while discreetly wiping away tears. A final-year nursing student, she was as beautiful as she was intelligent, having inherited her mother's empathy and warmth, along with the determination that was a family trademark. Grace accepted her diploma with a restrained smile, characteristic of her reserved personality. But her eyes shone with genuine pride. She gave a discreet bow to the provost and, turning to the audience, immediately searched for her family with her gaze. Upon locating Arthur, Eleanor, and Lily, she allowed herself an almost imperceptible but emotionally charged wave. After the ceremony, they met in the university gardens, where other graduates were celebrating with their families. Grace ran to hug her mother, then Lily, and finally Arthur, who lifted her off the ground in a tight hug, as he used to do when she was little. I'm so proud of you, Grace, he said, his voice choked. So proud. Thank you, Dad, she replied, using the word that, initially shy and hesitant, had become natural over the years. For everything. None of this would have been possible without you. Without us, he corrected, including Eleanor with a look. Your mother is the strongest, most determined person I've ever known. You get that from her. Eleanor, who now wore her hair short in an elegant style that highlighted her delicate features, smiled through her tears. It's a partnership. Always has been, she said, taking her husband's hand. The best decision I ever made was to trust this stubborn man who showed up in the rain 15 years ago. Lily, tall and slender like the biological father she barely remembered, approached with a bouquet of flowers. For the most brilliant engineer in Britain, she said, handing it to her sister with a theatrical flourish, who will soon be designing rockets for the UK's mission to Mars. Everyone laughed. Lily had always been the most expressive and dramatic in the family, a perfect counterpoint to Grace's seriousness. "Shall we celebrate?" Arthur suggested. "I've booked a table at the Ledbury, the most expensive restaurant in the city." "Dad, you didn't have to," Grace began, always conscious of spending, even after all these years of financial comfort. "Of course I did," he interrupted playfully. "It's not every day my eldest daughter graduates top of her class in aerospace engineering. Besides, your godparents are waiting for us there." "Joan and Anthony came?" Grace asked, surprised and moved. "Of course, they did." "Did you really think they'd miss your graduation?" Eleanor replied, smiling. "Martha and Peter are there too. The whole family." Family. The word echoed in Arthur's heart as they walked to the car, chatting excitedly. A family built not by blood, but by love, respect, by the conscious choice day after day to be together. The first few years hadn't been easy. After that night in the garden, when they finally admitted their feelings, Arthur and Eleanor decided to build their relationship slowly, always thinking of the girls' well-being. They started dating discreetly, going out for dinners when the children were at school, talking at length after they were asleep, truly getting to know each other. The social difference and their past as employer and employee were obstacles they had to overcome with honest dialogue and a lot of patience. Eleanor had to learn to see herself as an equal, to accept that she deserved that love, that life. Arthur had to unlearn privilege, recognize unconscious biases, and adapt to a simplicity that, he discovered, brought much more happiness than all the luxury of his previous life. After a year of dating, Arthur proposed. It was a simple proposal during a picnic in the park with the girls. He had prepared everything with the help of Grace and Lily, who were as anxious as he was. When Eleanor said, "Yes," the girls exploded with joy, jumping and shouting, finally allowing themselves to believe that this unlikely and wonderful family would be permanent. The wedding was an intimate ceremony, with only close friends and the mansion staff, who over the years had become an essential part of their lives. Joan, the head housekeeper, cried more than the bride herself. Mr. Anthony, the gardener, was the one who walked Eleanor down the aisle, a role she bestowed upon him with gratitude, recognizing in him the father figure who had supported her in the most difficult times. The girls were the bridesmaids, radiant in their blue dresses. London society, of course, had a field day with the scandal, the millionaire entrepreneur marrying his former housekeeper. Society columns speculated about gold digging, about Arthur's naivety, about Eleanor's opportunism. But those who truly knew them knew the truth, that rarely had a marriage been built on such solid foundations of mutual respect, genuine admiration, and true love. After the wedding, Eleanor insisted on continuing to work and study. She completed her secondary education with distinction and, encouraged by Arthur and her daughters, enrolled in university for a degree in business administration, graduating at 42. Currently, she was the director of the foundation Arthur had created to provide scholarships and support to underprivileged children, a job she performed with passion and excellence. At the restaurant, they found not only the former mansion staff, now dear friends, but also some of Grace's university colleagues and professors who had been important in her academic journey. The long table was decorated with small flower arrangements and miniature rockets, a personal touch that made Grace smile. "A toast to our engineer," Arthur proposed, raising his glass. "May your intelligence and determination take you as high as the rockets you will design." Everyone raised their glasses, and Grace, normally averse to being the center of attention, accepted the moment with a shy but proud smile. "Thank you all for being here," she said, with the firm voice she had developed over the years, overcoming her childhood shyness. "Especially my family. Mum, Lily." She paused, looking directly at Arthur. "Dad, you are my foundation, my inspiration. Everything I have achieved, I owe to you." "Nonsense," Lily interrupted with her expansive manner. "You've always been a genius, Grace. We just gave you a little push." Everyone laughed, and the conversation flowed animatedly during dinner. Grace shared the news that she had been accepted into a master's program in partnership with NASA, a dream that had seemed impossible for the girl who once lived in a single room in East London. "I'm going to miss you when you're in the States," Lily commented, suddenly serious. "I'll miss you too," Grace replied, taking her sister's hand. "But it's only 2 years. And you'll be too busy at the hospital to notice I'm gone." Lily had excelled in her nursing course, specializing in pediatrics. Her caring nature and her ability to make children smile, even in the most difficult moments, made her an exceptional professional, already sought after by several hospitals even before she graduated. As he watched them talk, Arthur couldn't help but reflect on the extraordinary journey they had taken. He remembered the first time he saw the girls, soaked by the rain, shivering from the cold under the oak tree. He remembered Grace, serious and suspicious, studying advanced maths in a worn-out notebook. And Lily, with her gap-toothed smile, announcing she had a mermaid doll in her backpack. Now they were accomplished, independent, strong women. They had been given every opportunity they deserved, but they never lost their humility, their empathy, their awareness of where they came from, and of how many others were still waiting for a similar chance. Both dedicated part of their free time to social projects, especially those linked to the family's foundation. "What are you thinking about?" Eleanor asked, noticing his distant gaze. "About how life comes full circle," he replied, squeezing his wife's hand. "About how a storm can be the beginning of something wonderful." Eleanor smiled, understanding perfectly. That rainy afternoon was etched in all their memories as the turning point, the moment when fate intervened to unite 4 lonely souls into a family. After dinner, late at night, they returned to the house where they had lived for 10 years, not the imposing, cold mansion in Kensington, which Arthur had sold shortly after the wedding, but a spacious and welcoming house in Richmond, with a beautiful garden where Mr. Anthony, now retired but still active, regularly came to plant his favorite flowers. The girls, although they had their own flats, graduation gifts from Arthur, often came home on weekends for family lunches, movie marathons, or simply to be together. "Can I talk to you two for a minute?" Grace asked when they got home. Lily had already said goodbye, heading to her own flat with the promise of returning for Sunday lunch. "Of course, dear," Eleanor replied, sitting on the living room sofa. Arthur joined her, and Grace sat in the armchair opposite them. "I wanted to thank you, once again, for everything," she began with the formality she had never completely abandoned. "But I also wanted to share a decision I've made." Arthur and Eleanor exchanged intrigued glances. "NASA offered me a full scholarship for the master's program," Grace continued, "but I've decided that, after completing it, I'm coming back to the UK." "But, darling, the opportunities over there," Arthur began, surprised. "Are many, I know," she interrupted gently, "but there are many here too. Our country needs qualified people, willing to build something better. I want to be part of that. I want to develop the British space program, create opportunities for other young people like me." Eleanor smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "That is so you, Grace," she said tenderly, "always thinking beyond yourself." "I learned from the best," the young woman replied, looking meaningfully at her parents. "You both taught me that privilege comes with responsibility, that it's not enough to get ahead in life. You have to extend a hand to help others get ahead too." Arthur felt his chest swell with emotion. This was perhaps the greatest reward of all, seeing that the values he had tried to impart had been truly absorbed, that his daughters understood the importance of using their talents and opportunities to make a difference in the world. "I am so proud of you, Grace," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "and I will support whatever decision you make. Always." Grace stood up and, in a rare gesture of physical affection, hugged her parents simultaneously. "Thank you for believing in me, even when I was just a scared little girl sitting in the rain," she whispered. Later, already in their bedroom, Arthur and Eleanor were getting ready for bed, the comfortable silence between them occasionally broken by comments about the day. "It still feels like a dream sometimes," Eleanor confessed, as she brushed her hair in front of the mirror. "Seeing Grace graduated, Lily almost finishing her degree. When I think about the life we used to have—" Arthur came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and meeting her gaze in the reflection. "For me too," he admitted. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and just look at you, sleeping beside me, and I wonder how I got so lucky." Eleanor turned to face him, her arms wrapping around his neck. "It wasn't luck, Arthur. It was choice. You chose to see beyond appearances, beyond social conventions. You chose to be human when it would have been easier to pretend you didn't see. And you chose to trust me, even when you had every reason not to," he completed, touching her face tenderly. "You chose to give me a chance to prove I was more than just a rich boss trying to ease his conscience." Eleanor smiled, the same smile that had won him over years ago, a perfect mixture of strength and sweetness. "Do you know what Grace once told me when she was still little? That you had the sad eyes of someone who had everything except what really mattered." Arthur laughed, surprised. "She was always too observant for her own good. But she was right. I had everything money could buy, and yet I was empty inside. The three of you taught me what really matters in life." "And what is that?" Eleanor teased, though she already knew the answer. "Genuine connection, purpose. The feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself. Family," he replied, kissing her softly. "Love." The next morning, they woke to the sound of someone in the kitchen. It was Sunday, still early, but the smell of fresh coffee already filled the house. They found Grace preparing breakfast with the methodical efficiency she applied to all tasks. "Good morning," she greeted, smiling as she saw them. "I thought you deserved to be spoiled today." "What a lovely surprise," Eleanor commented, hugging her daughter. "I thought you'd still be asleep after all the celebrating yesterday." "You know I've never been one for sleeping in," Grace replied, pouring coffee into colorful mugs. "Besides, I wanted to enjoy some time with you before I start preparing for the move." The doorbell rang, and minutes later Lily burst into the kitchen like a hurricane of energy, carrying bags of fresh bread and fruit. "Family reunited for Sunday breakfast," she exclaimed, planting a loud kiss on each of their cheeks. "Who would have thought, eh? Grace awake before noon on a weekend." "Only because it's a special day," Grace defended herself with a discreet smile. "Every day is special when we're together," Lily declared, with her always romantic and expressive manner. Arthur watched the scene with a full heart. His daughters, his wife, all gathered around the kitchen table on a Sunday morning, sharing not just a meal but their lives, their dreams, their achievements. An imperfect family, built in unlikely circumstances, but more solid and true than many formed by conventional ties. "What are you thinking about, Dad?" Lily asked, noticing his contemplative gaze. "You've got that philosopher look on your face again." Arthur laughed, accepting the cup of coffee Grace offered him. "I'm thinking about storms," he replied cryptically. "Storms?" Lily repeated, confused. "Yes," he confirmed, exchanging a knowing look with Eleanor. "About how, sometimes, you need a storm to clear the sky, to make us see what was always right in front of our eyes but we never truly saw." Grace nodded, immediately understanding the reference to that rainy afternoon that had changed everyone's destiny. "To storms, then," she proposed, raising her cup in an impromptu toast, "and to the shelters we built together after them." "To storms," they all agreed, clinking their cups together in the center of the table, a family celebrating not just a daughter's graduation, but the extraordinary journey that had brought them there. Outside, as if in response, the London sky began to cloud over. Soon another summer shower would fall, washing the city, renewing the air, reminding everyone that sometimes you have to get a little wet to find the true meaning of home. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Arthur, Eleanor, Grace and Lily has touched your hearts. To continue on this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here by clicking on the left. If you enjoyed this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the transformative power of love and compassion. Don't miss our upcoming content. We would be delighted to read your comments and know what this story awakened in you.